So back in the 1990s, you didn't get much better than the Robin comic headlined by Dick Grayson. You know, back in the 1990s, you couldn't get much better in DC Comics than the Robin series headlined by Tim Drake Robin. It was a really cool series, and it really made Tim Drake an interesting character because not only did he have to stand in the shadow of Batman like all Robins did, but he also had to stand in the shadow of Dick Grayson, who's the gold standard of sidekicks, and then Jason Todd, who came directly before him, who, you know, Batman saw get brutally killed by the Joker. And that really affected the dynamic between the two characters, which was really cool to see develop in his own series, especially from Robin's point of view. And the book always had a really solid creative team behind it. DC made an effort to put good creators on this book. They didn't necessarily need to always be top-tier creators, but they were always good, even following artists like, you know, Norm Brayfogle, who's just a legendary Batman artist, and Chuck Dixon, who's this awesome writer. Even as they left, they got replaced by people who seemed to know the character and were passionate about the character and good storytelling and knew things about visual storytelling, the visual medium, how to compose a scene really well for the eyes, and how to create a narrative that pulls you in and makes the characters relatable to you. And the comic itself was interesting because it went to a lot of places that you didn't expect the comic to go to. Like, it really delved into the idea of what it would be like to be a high school age kid who's also a crime fighter and member of the Bat family. Like, he would go out, you know, with Batman patrolling, and then he would have to go to school the next day. He's just covered in cuts and bruises, and he's exhausted. And of course, he gets called into the counselor's office, and questions are asked. And, you know, how do they deal with this investigation? How do they explain this off? How do they satisfy, you know, the people who are looking into this? What happens when his friends are getting concerned? These are all interesting questions, and the book did a really good job dealing with them. They also had a good relationship with Connor Kent, and he together as kind of partners. This was before the Super Sons, so this was like the next generation of Superman and Batman in the early 2000s into the 90s, and it was cool to watch how these two played off each other. And then there was a relationship that he had with Spoiler, who was another superhero that was another vigilante about the same age as Robin, and the relationship the two of them would eventually have, which we'll get into a little bit later in the video. But all that being said, DC decided it was time to look at Tim Drake and update him for modern audiences. And we all know what card DC plays when it's time to update a character for today's reader, and that is we flip his sexuality and we make him gay. So now that Robin has had his makeover and he's presentable to be thrown out into the new era of comic book readers, let's take a look at the latest offering, Tim Drake Robin #1. Yes, I read this Drek, and we are going to experience it together. So let's open the book. First, we're looking at the cover. The cover almost wants to drag you in. You know, it's got this high octane looking action where Robin's got this crazy eyed guy by the throat, and he's jump kicking right towards the reader. And it's like Armageddon in the background. And then you open the book up, and you're just greeted with this just high octane, high effort looking artwork where Tim Drake doesn't look off model at all. He looks, you know, like he doesn't have a neck that's too skinny for his body, or his eyes are too far apart, or his nose is not in the center of his face. And this just dynamic color palette of green and blue and green. And as we kind of go through the story, it turns out that he's not lurking on a deserted, scary marina. No, he lives on this marina now. He actually just lives in a rundown boat, and he's on this marina because he's got a date with his boyfriend. And so Tim Drake meets his boyfriend with his face and head looking like a foot, and the two of them have a nice dinner. And then Robin kind of wanders off, starstruck like a little lovesick schoolboy with hearts floating above his head. And we see more characters in this scene that totally look human and have normal expressions, and their eyes are completely lined up, and their noses are always in the middle of their faces, and Tim Drake's head just bends like that at the cheekbone. So, yeah, you can tell a lot of thought and effort went into this, and I know I'm giving a lot of crap to the artist right now, and art is subjective, and there are people like and dislike all kinds of things, but part of the reasons I'm doing this is because this artist, Riley Rousseau, I know his stuff, and I know he's better than this, so this seems very rushed, and it seems, again, very low effort, and I know that he could have churned out better work than this. This guy drew the Robin King storyline from the Death Metal series, and that looked pretty cool, where his artwork actually, kind of this weird quirky style of his, he was able to turn it into something twisted and dark and disturbing, and now it just looks kind of sad. So anyway, we find out that Robin is living on a boat, and a lot of the story is the date, then walking back to the boat, and then talking about the boat and how all various characters in the DC universe would react if they found out he was living on the boat. And he's approached and reunited with a side character from the I Am Robin series. And then a scream happens, and somebody's been murdered. And so it's time to don the Robin suit and spring into action. And to give the book a little bit of credit, we actually get kind of Robin using his detective skills in this next scene. But I'm not going to give it that much credit because the clues are stupid and his conclusions that he reaches are nonsensical. So he and the other Robin girl, who is called Sparrow, are attacked by a glowing orangutan. And he seems to be able to beat people to death with his bare hands, but if you try to attack him, he's completely intangible. So I'm not sure how that works. And Robin even found a tuft of hair that he attributes to orangutan fur, which is odd since this isn't an orangutan. It's like some weird kind of hologram. So I don't know how that clue worked, but that he found that with his awesome detective skills. And along with the fact that the body was crushed and orangutan handprint and all this other stuff. So he does eventually remember that he fought a glowing animal like this during the Marvel or the DC Voices comic, which you would think that would have sprung to mind the very moment this orangutan sprung onto the scene. And the way they defeated him before was they had to find this kind of like glowing control disc and break it. So he finds it and breaks it, but the orangutan doesn't give up. And so it turns out that this orangutan's like a puzzle, and he comes from a book. He comes from Edgar Allan Poe poem, and so Robin discerns that the orangutan in the poem wanted to be a human, and so he picks up a straight razor he found at the crime scene and shoves it down the holographic ape's throat, and the holographic ape vanishes because that was the solution to the puzzle, because that makes all the sense. And so he and Sparrow go back to the boat. We get to see Robin in the second panel in these awful shorts as they're washing off his boat and trying to fix it up. And so he and Sparrow having a conversation about what they just encountered and whether or not he should tell his boyfriend that he's Robin. And then a package arrives, and it basically says, "Good work, detective. I'll see you later," indicating that whoever this Riddler-like villain is who makes holographic beings from other novels is going to be a recurring antagonist. I won't know because I don't plan on buying anything beyond this book, because this book was a fever dream and nonsensical nightmare. But yeah, so that is it. That is the dumb as hammers plot of Tim Drake Robin #1. So let's address the elephant in the room here, and that's going to be Robin's sexuality. Now, I know I give Jonathan Kent a lot of trouble, and he's another gay character. And to be clear, and I've said this multiple times, I don't trash on John Kent as being the worst fictional character in the history of fiction because he is gay. I do it because he's terribly written. His relationship is literally the center of who he is. And DC Comics just released a press release that the latest storyline of Jonathan Kent is that he is going to come out and reveal his sexuality to the DC Universe. The storyline before that was he was going to reveal it to his mom. The storyline before that was he was going to reveal it to his boyfriend. I mean, the only time John Kent is at all mentioned in solicits or on social media for anything, it has to do with him telling someone that he's gay. There's no story beyond him. There's nothing beyond that. And the times that he is kind of outside that, he's just an insufferable idiot, and I cannot stand him with terror. And he has, I can't even go on anymore about John Kent. We're focusing on Tim Drake here. Now, Tim Drake was kind of a ladies' man in his day. So you had the relationship with Spoiler, which again, if you were a comic fan of the 90s, this was a pretty big deal relationship. This was a pretty iconic one. We're going to get into why in a second. He also would have storylines where he would even move in on Superboy, his best friend's girl, and the two of them kind of had a thing going behind his back. He was even so much of a dude that he was able to transcend universes and went over to the Marvel universe and had a fling with Jubilee from the X-Men. I mean, this guy's status of ladies' man was kind of legendary in comics, which makes him, all of a sudden realizing that he's gay just comes really out of nowhere and is completely out of character for Tim Drake. And then the story of the comic book and the way he's written is terrible. He's falling into that trap of Jonathan Kent, where it's his sexuality and his relationship first and the storyline second. And it's really just hard to watch. I don't know. He doesn't act like himself. He doesn't just not only not look like himself in this book at all, he doesn't act like himself. This isn't the Tim Drake we've ever known. Tim Drake's always been kind of this broody, tortured character. He's got this intellect, this detective mind. Is at least as good of a detective as Batman himself. And it's even been hinted that he's going to someday be better. And so he's got this mind that sees everything from all these different angles, and it really gives him a darkness to him. He has trouble trusting people. And now I realize this guy that he's dating is somebody he's known for a long time, so that makes sense. But at the same time, it's, again, this just turn into sexuality doesn't make sense for the character. It just really doesn't. And I know people like to just jump and call people who criticize it, homophobe or whatever else. But I mean, it's just kind of true. The character has a pretty long established history. If you wanted to take a Robin and make him gay, it would almost make more sense for it to be Damian Wayne, because he's a younger character. He's kind of in that stage of life where you're discovering these things about yourself. And that would be an interesting journey to kind of see a kid go through that journey of discovery. Not somebody who's kind of already older and established who just decides one day that this is what he is. And yeah, I mean, I know that can happen out in the real world, but I'm sorry, comic books tend to be based on just lore and built continuity, and this just butts in the face of all of it. And then the writing in the book itself is just awful. It's just cringy. It's sappy. It's the same problem that I think a lot of writers fall into when it comes to writing gay couples, which is they write them very idealized and they write them very sterile. There's no drama. There's no conflict or problems. I mean, yeah, you've got the will I tell him I'm Robin or not thing, but that's pretty standard for any relationship, really, even just a friendship. So, but when you see him written this way, I mean, like just walking off with a little heart floaty above his head and all this, I mean, this isn't Tim Drake. Tim Drake is, again, he's supposed to be a darker character. That's part of the cool factor of him. And we're going to compare this to another storyline from Tim Drake's past, and that's going to be a moment in his life when Spoiler becomes pregnant. Now, in the comic books, they actually did a very, very well-written arc where Spoiler, Tim Drake's girlfriend, becomes pregnant. And first, I'm going to, right out the gate, it's not Tim Drake's. She's pregnant from a relationship she had before she met him. Then the two of them became a thing, and she'd kind of already started suspecting that she was pregnant, and then she was able to confirm it after her and Tim had already gotten together. But the interesting about this storyline was, obviously, you had the whole angle of this was a character who was, not only was she a teenage superhero, she was really excited to be a teenage superhero, and she had to hang up the costume in order to have her baby. And they went through what are the options? What are you going to do with the baby? Are you going to have this baby? And they actually show them having these conversations. It's actually really good character work they did, especially for Stephanie. And what was really cool about it was, so Robin ends up sticking with her through the entire pregnancy because he still loves her. And he basically tells her, whatever you decide to do with the kid, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be with you. And it was interesting to see, especially somebody who was about the age Tim Drake is supposed to be in this storyline, and you're dating girls and doing all this other stuff. It was interesting to see the storyline develop from that perspective, because it was the story of these two young lovers, or these two kids in a relationship, but they're in way over their heads. They're dealing with problems that they shouldn't have to deal with for at least another 5 to 10 years, but they're dealing with them now, and they're just trying to keep their heads above water. And it's just kind of got this beauty and this sadness to it all at the same time. And, ultimately she decides to give the baby up for adoption, and then they have the conversation of, are you even gonna look at the baby before you hand it off? And it's just a really cool moment in the comic. And then, she actually goes through labor, and Robin is there with her because she has no one else. And this was a moment that really brought these two characters together, and is really just a masterclass in character development, in writing, and taking an issue that is really serious. I mean, a teenage pregnancy is a problem in this society, and it addressed it in a realistic and compassionate kind of way. And this is the writing that's just absent from DC Comics right now. And I mean, we don't need to talk about the just awful way they've treated Stephanie Brown, Spoiler's character, beyond this point. But this was DC at its best. This is excellent writing. And really, when they resurrected, spoiler, when they brought, or they didn't really resurrect her, it's just she never died apparently. I was kind of looking forward to maybe picking back up with that relationship, and now that, you know, a few years have passed and both of them have gone through so much, you know, what's it going to mean and how are they going to go forward? And apparently they're not, which is just a shame, which is why that turn for Dick Grayson rubs so many fans the wrong way. But ultimately, this new Robin is just a dog turd of a comic. I can't find a single redeeming quality about it. And while on one hand, it's not so much because of the relationship he's in right now, but it is overshadowed. It takes the majority of the book is that. And if he's not on the date with his boyfriend, he's going to the date. And if he's not on the date, he's talking about the date. Then you've got about 4 pages of a little bit of action with a glowing orangutan where he just reaches a bunch of conclusions that don't make any sense. And then he moves on with this, you know, looming threat of this bizarre literary themed villain hanging over in the background. The art is low effort and bad. The characters are off model. Tim Drake is completely unrecognizable. They don't even try to make it familiar to long-term fans of the comic book. And again, I'm chiding the art a little bit on this because I know that this particular artist can do a better job than he did here. I'm not necessarily blaming him. He was given a garbage script to work with, and he probably didn't have the time that he needed to really put his signature touches on this book and make it his own. Not to mention the book just doesn't give him room to stretch as an artist and really bring in that sense of style that he's normally known for. Yeah, and the dialogue in this book is just cringe beyond cringe. It's people are talking this book not like human beings talk. And again, it's that classic trap that comic book writers don't know how to write LGB couples. The secret to writing them really is you write them like a couple. You write them as like 2 individuals that are coming together and having a relationship. They are going to have drama. They're going to have baggage. They're going to have conflict. And honestly, you want them as a reader to have these things because that's what makes them interesting. And if they're not interesting, then why am I going to read about it? I don't need to read about a boring couple that just smile at each other, gaze into each other's eyes, and never have a fight or a struggle. It's just like the Harley Quinn thing. I've said it many times. Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy are really cool characters, and their relationship is a neat idea, but every time they come together, the 2 of them become the least interesting characters in the world. All of a sudden, all of Harley's craziness and unpredictability just goes out the window. She dotes all over Ivy, and all of Ivy's kind of introspectiveness and her weird conflict and hatred of humanity just goes away. She just kind of folds her arm, rolls her eyes, and says, "Oh, Harley." And that's pretty much what they get based down to. And the same thing's happening here to Tim Drake. All of his grit is gone. His darkness is gone. Those daring to go to places where you don't expect a comic book to go, that element of the book isn't even... There's not even a hint of that here in this series. So yeah, I award this book no points, and may God have mercy on its soul. So now let's discuss it. That's my review of Tim Drake Robin #1. But what did you think? Did you read this comic? Were you excited that Tim Drake was getting his own book again? And then now that it's here, what did you think? Was this the book that you were hoping for? Or were you like me and just tremendously let down, especially as a fan of the old Tim Drake Robin comic of the 1990s and early 2000s? So yeah, let's talk about that in the comments below. While you're down there, please do all the usual YouTube stuff. Hit like, subscribe, share, like and comment on the video if you can. It really just kind of helps this video get out in front of more people and helps grow the channel and grow this community that we're kind of building here. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you guys about this book because, yeah, I let you know all my thoughts and I had a lot of strong opinions about it. I want to know what you guys think. So, yeah, this was kind of a long video, so I'm just going to leave it right here. And I will see you guys on the next video. See you then. Bye.